I want to talk about Google's release of Genie 3. And I want to talk about this particularly in the context of Unity, which is one of the companies that's sold off the hardest. Now, I would have thought recently Unity would have been on my buy list, and maybe they still are after this conversation, but now they're sort of moving into that. I can't tell if they're going to be truly disrupted or if they're in a baby with the bathwater moment like these other SaaS companies. And this is one of the things we are going to have to do in this moment, but we are being presented with a lot of great stocks on sale today. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on Unity and in the context of Genie 3 and see if we can't move them into one bucket or the other, victim of AI or unreasonably sold off.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. Google announced Genie 3, which is a general purpose world model. If you haven't looked at the videos, it's one of the coolest AI releases. Austin, I assume you've looked at a lot of them. Uh, they're
Incredible.
incredible.
Yeah. You and I were sharing one, but basically, we're going to merge verbs here or expressions that didn't exist a couple of years ago. But basically, vibe coding your own video game in real time are some of the video demos that we saw. And this is something that people have talked about conceptually. And this was the first time that I felt like you could actually see it manifest, the idea of everybody having sort of like a choose your own adventure in that form factor, not just video games, but you could take it to movies as well. I mean, it truly becomes like one of those, choose your own adventure books where uh, flip to page 15 if you want to open the treasure chest, or flip to page 20 if you want to walk away. It's very cool.
Yeah, you phrased it succinctly that it's kind of vibe coding for video games. We've got vibe coding for software, and that's led to massive sell-off in the industry. Now video games gets its own existential moment where it's vibe coding for video games, everything's selling off. So every video game's off massive. Unity's off approaching 50%. So, the question is it time to panic? It's a really interesting question because Unity, Austin, why we had originally added it was because they have a competitor named AppLovin, which was one of the biggest gainers in the entire market back in the 2024 period. The reason why was similar to what happened with Meta. They just making their advertising phenomenally more successful via leaning into AI. And we thought Uni would be able to copy that. They have. Their stock was up more than 100% within the past week. All of those gains are gone. When I looked this morning, it was completely flat from where we recommended it. So, are they going to be disrupted? Well, I think there is a potential for this to be really bad for things like video game studios. I was looking at Grand Theft Auto 6, which is coming out at the end of this year, and they proudly noted that
Maybe hasn't that thing been
maybe
delayed for like 3 years? My goodness.
I think it's a firm announce at this point, but they said it was a bullet point that they proudly didn't use generative AI. And to me, I'm like, are you crazy? Right? I mean, this is a expansive open world. It's a franchise that could really benefit from this, but there's a lot of culture in video games that might be antithetical to this and might just create a cost structure for large studios and publicly
Right.
traded companies that doesn't compete well with kind of the grassroots video games that you're able to make. So I can see a lot of the damage there. But Austin, what Unity does, they create the game engines, the graphics we see, and people focus on that aspect. And I see how you see Genie 3 and say they're toast, but game engines also provide back-end infrastructure, the monetization that ties in the ad network, DevOps, features like networking. So the long story short, if you have a groundswell of an incredible amount of video games that are able to be created via these tools for much more cheaply, that might be bad for large studios, and it might be great for a platform company like Unity. All the same, Austin, we bought the company on a thesis about kind of being able to really clean up their ad side and be able to get the same kind of directional growth as AppLove, and that had started playing out, but it's no longer the narrative for the stock. And we're looking at software stocks. If you've got a really bad network narrative overhanging you for years, all these software stocks are making more money. They're beating estimates, and their shares are still down often 50 to 80%. So I don't know. I'm really in indecision right now. We're going to talk about rebalancing. I could see selling Unity, even though I think this is overblown. just because do I want that capital hanging into this for years to let this narrative play through, or would I rather just invest this to great ideas? Um, Seeing some of the revenue growth I've talked about as I'm looking at earnings right now. So we are going to have an expert on in an upcoming episode for video games if anyone wants to focus on that. But it is remarkable how industries like video games can see this kind of sudden reversal. It's going to be a feature of kind of this AI world we've entered.